Hello, I'm Juliet Antonio.
I'm Aaron Isaac.
And welcome to Where's the Director? Because we would like to have a word with them. It's been a while since we've done an episode, but we're back. And this week, we are talking about the animated Disney film Encanto. So as always, here's what you need to know. Encanto, Spanish for enchantment, is an animated fantasy movie musical from Disney Studios with a screenplay by Charisse Castro-Smith and Jared Bush, and original songs by Lin-Manuel Miranda. Set in Colombia at the beginning of the 20th century, the movie focuses on the Madrigal family, all of whom, except the protagonist Mirabel, have a magical gift that helps them serve the people of their rural community, the Encanto. When Mirabel learns that her family is losing their magic, she takes it upon herself to discover what's happening to save her loved ones and her home. After Disney's success with Zootopia, directing team Jared Bush and Byron Howard wanted to try to make a movie musical as a departure from the normal buddy films. Lin-Manuel Miranda joined the project after writing the songs for Moana. The three men discussed their experiences being part of large extended families and decided to make that the focus of their movie. Their three thesis statements were, most of us don't feel truly seen by our families, most of us carry burdens we never let our families see, and most of us are oblivious that nearly all of us, especially within our own families, feel the same way. Lin suggested Latin American music could best capture the complexity of the family relationships the team wanted to write. Jared and Byron started talking with Juan Rendon and Natalie Osma, whom they worked with on the documentary Imagining Zootopia. Both Rendon and Osma are from Colombia, and their stories of Colombian culture helped Jared, Byron, and Lin decide this was where they wanted their story to be set. Now, as is tradition with Disney for a movie's pre-production, their team visited Colombia and consulted cultural experts and historians. The design of Mirabel was based on one of their tour guides, Alejandra Espinosa Urbe. The team observed that all the towns in Colombia had distinct personalities, which helped them imagine the Encanto as a remote, spiritually blessed domain. As Urbe explained, quote, Colombians are surrounded by sacred lands that feel magical, and we coexist with them, not questioning their existence. The movie was rewritten copiously with many different drafts. One version followed the Madrigals over the course of a century. Another had Mirabel getting in a fist fight with Isabel and celebrating her quinceañera, which I could see happening. But as the plot evolved over several years, the core of the film was the relationship between Mirabel and her abuela, Alma Madrigal. Encanto premiered at the El Capitan Theater in LA on November 3rd, 2021, and was released in the US and Canada on November 24th for a 30-day run due to COVID. It grossed $248 million worldwide, and of course made even more money when premiering on Disney Plus on Christmas Eve of that same year, topping the Nielsen streaming ratings chart at over 1.4 billion minutes watched. As for the music, Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote 8 original songs in Spanish and in English. The score uses traditional Colombian instruments, e.g. marimba, accordion, and maracas, and draws from diverse musical styles of Colombia with salsa, tango, cumbia, bambucho, vallenato, and bachata. Apologies if I've mispronounced all of these. I see these words and my brain goes to Portuguese instead of Spanish. All of these are fused with other genres of funk, hip-hop, pop, folk, and musical theater, of course. Upon the release, the soundtrack topped the Billboard Hot 200 chart for 8 weeks, and all 8 songs made it on the Billboard Hot 100. We Don't Talk About Bruno charted at number 1, the first song to do so since A Whole New World, the first Disney song to do so, since A Whole New World with Peabo Bryson and Regina Bell. What makes the soundtrack successful is how the story links the songs together and lets fans relive the film by listening to the music. So if you don't have the energy to watch a movie, you can listen to the CD. Encanto has gone on to garner critical acclaim for its diversity and for its honest portrayal of generational trauma due to displacement. As of recording, it won the Golden Globe for Best Animated Feature and was nominated for Best Animated Feature, Best Score, and Best Original Song at the Oscars, and it did go on to win Best Animated Feature. Now, Aaron, with all of that out of the way, where would you like to start?
I'm wondering what your general feel of the film was, like how you felt about it.
Okay, the first time I watched it was not a pleasant experience emotionally, because I was seeing in Mirabel's story, and with some of the other family members, experiences that popped up in my own life. So it was very hard to watch because the tension was building, and I was waiting for resolution of some sort. And because it's a Disney movie, and it's family-friendly, they're going to give us the happy ending version of it. When in most cases of family trauma, there is no happy ending. But I was very grateful that it had that emotional catharsis, because this is just my opinion. If it didn't, I wouldn't have enjoyed it as much because it would have felt too real to me. How about you?
I generally liked the film. I have a love-hate relationship with it. which more so leans towards the love side.
Okay.
My problems with the film, it's mostly a lot of nitpicks.
Okay.
Like there are just a lot of plot holes and which just don't make sense. And we can talk about. I'm particularly like annoyed every time someone brings up Bruno, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah, we will talk about that later.
But I didn't care for the ending, and I think the ending kind of makes that hate side kind of pop out for me.
I'm very curious now.
But generally speaking, I did like the film. Okay. If you had to put me on the spot, I'd be like 8, 9 out of 10. But if you just like make your own ending in your head, you could probably, yeah. Yeah.
All right. So are there any existential topics that you want to address right out of the gate, or do you want to go into the songs and kind of go from there?
Ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Let's go into the songs, because I thought the songs, so the songs themselves separated from the movie. I liked all the songs. Mm-hmm. Great songs. Didn't have a problem with them. I will be I'm a little annoyed because there are just some times in the movie where people start singing, but it doesn't fit. You know what I mean?
Well, I think I'm going to add a caveat to that. Mm-hmm. We talked about this in our introductory episode where we did Musical Theater 101 and Existentialism 101. What I was taught in terms of musical theater structure is that whenever people burst out into song, it's not random, because when you're speaking lines on stage in a musical, eventually the emotions are raised to such a level that you have to sing them because there's no other way to express them. And after that in the song, when the emotions get to such a level, you can't just sing them. Now you have to dance. And then when you get to that maximum point, then it goes back down to singing and dialogue. Mm. But, that's just one common critique I hear of musical theater, where people just burst into song randomly and people don't necessarily understand why.
Well, I mean, there is that. I will say there's a bit of that. Mm-hmm. But I could excuse that. What I was more pointing to was, you didn't need to have certain characters come in when they did singing.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So like I just feel like some songs, yeah, you could have cut out, and I think some sometimes I just felt like, yeah, I got it. Okay. Go on.
To be fair, I could think of one song that could have been cut from the movie, and it could have been a dialogue scene. But there's this great quotation from Cinema Therapy, which is an excellent YouTube channel. And the song list here, I love Lin-Manuel Miranda's songwriting, so I'm biased. But I think of a quotation Cinema Therapy said when talking about Marvel movies specifically, and it said, "All of them in general are very good, and none of them are bad." Like, technically, none of them are bad story-wise, acting-wise. None of them are bad. But there are some that are better than others. And
I would agree with that.
That's what I think of the songs here. It's like, none of them are awful. None of them are horribly written or poorly acted. But some of them are better than others. And you know which ones they are.
Yes, I think that better encapsulates my feelings on this.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so in terms of where to start with songs, I'm going to start with the opening number, and then we can go from there, because it establishes the world and lists the members of the family. So, for the musical theater fans, this song is Lin-Manuel Miranda's version of the iconic opening number Belle from Beauty and the Beast, which in that movie perfectly introduced the protagonist, their relationship with the town, and with the antagonist. And this is my little side note, my own personal opinion. Nothing will ever beat Belle as an opening number. If you ever said, this is the greatest opening number of all time, I wouldn't fight you on that. But this homage is well done, and I'm confident about Lynn's ability to succeed Howard Ashman as the lyricist for live-action Little Mermaid. So with that out of the way. The framing device of this song is Mirabelle answering questions from children in the village about her family, and the children are obvious stand-ins for the audience, so there's a reason for her to sing this background information and exposition dump. And it introduces us to Mirabelle, whose name means wonder in Spanish, her family, and also establishes her love for her family and how proud she is to be a Madrigal at this point in time. Mm-hmm. Musically, the song is written as a vallenato number, which is a genre of popular folk music in Colombia, meaning born in the valley. And it comes from farmers who sang these songs as entertainment and also as part of their job of transmitting news to families in other villages while traveling through the region with their cattle. So it's perfect for this song as Mirabel informs us about the world she grew up in. And a nice touch is also how Lin wanted Mirabel at one point in the song to sound like a trumpet solo he had playing in his head, like when she's singing Tia Pepa da 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 da. Those aren't the notes, sorry. And she really sounds like she's making a proud declaration by sounding like a trumpet. So we learn that Ballad is the matriarch who states the family's purpose is to use the gifts that the Encanto has given them to help their community so they can be worthy of it and keep the candle burning for each generation. So then we meet Abuela's children. Tia Pepa, whose mood affects the weather, Tio Bruno, who we don't talk about until later when we have to, and Mirabel's mother, Julieta, who heals people with food. Now there's the sons-in-law, Tio Felix and Mirabel's father, Agustin, neither of whom have gifts, but in my opinion are some of the best Disney dads that we've had in a while. There's the cousins, Dolores, who can hear everything, Camillo, who can shapeshift, and Antonio, who gets his gift a few scenes later in the movie, where he can talk to animals. And finally, there's Mirabel's sisters, Luisa, who is super strong, and Isabella, who grows flowers. But then as the song progresses, the children become even more curious and ask, Mirabel, what's your gift? And she doesn't answer and hides behind her family to try to distract the children, but it doesn't work. And this is when we learn about the conflict at the heart of the story. Mirabel doesn't have a gift, and we see how it creates friction with her family members, but also creates conflict within herself.
Mm-hmm. I think that's made very explicit when, I think it's at the end of the song when Mirabel and the children are in front of the house, which has a specific name. Do you remember?
Casita.
Casita, yeah.
Meaning house.
Yeah. I just didn't know if like it had like an actual name,
like a title, yeah.
Because this house is magic.
Yes.
For a lack of a better term, right? It can kind of fix itself. It can like decorate itself and
it could clean itself, which I would want in a house.
yeah. But they're in front of the house, and this part isn't sung, but there's this guy handing out like what you could think about like as fruit baskets, kind of, but like
party stuff, party favors.
Yeah. So he gives it to Mirabel, and it was the most passive aggressive justification for giving her the gift, because he's like, I know you aren't special, so I made a special party gift just for you.
Just like a backhanded compliment right in the face.
Yeah, it is like, wow, dude, like that was not necessary, but it kind of sets the scene, and it kind of defines it, because if you didn't get it, Mirabel doesn't have powers like her siblings. And funny enough, I don't think Abuela has powers either. I think she's just the patriarch.
She's just the matriarch, yeah. And she's just trying to make sure, her family lives up to what she wants them to be. That way the candle can keep burning. It's kind of like, I can't think of a specific term to refer to her and her role in the family, but she just kind of is, not, manager's not the right word, but she's making sure that they're playing the roles that she wants them to play. And as you see in the movie, any moment of imperfection or where they're not living up to her ideal of what she wants them to be is something that's not tolerated.
Well, it's interesting, too, because what I think one of the things that could have made the movie make a little more sense was to give Abuela some kind of power, even if it's kind of like marginal, like it doesn't really do much, because one of the central conflict between her and Mirabel is that Mirabel is kind of like the relative you don't talk about, but they're...
Well, that's Bruno in this case.
That's Bruno, but you could very much see, like, at certain points, Mirabel is kind of thrust into that kind of role where she isn't readily accepted by really anyone.
And it's, there's moments in the movie where Mirabel's parents, Juliet and Augustin, it's clear that they love her unconditionally. And they say to her, we still love you, I still see the value in you, even if they don't.
But
when it's only a minority of voices telling you that, and when I say minority, I mean like a number in this case, when it's only 2 voices telling you that, and everyone else doesn't see that, it's super hard to believe.
It is, but I also think that to some extent, the way they express their love is problematic. Because I don't doubt at any point in the movie that Abuela loves Maribel. I doubt that she treats Maribel well.
Yes.
And when that happens, you can say abstractly, theoretically, yes, Abuela loves Maribel. But in all practical space, you don't feel that, and you don't see it. So what are we really talking about?
Yeah, and you can easily see that there was like some debate about whether or not Abuela is the quote unquote villain of the movie, to which I say no, she's not. Absolutely not. But I could see why some people would think that, because it seems like, because as you said, it's very clear that she loves Mirabel, but based on her actions, you could see why people would think her love would be unconditional. It's just basically what has happened to her and her husband that causes her to act this way. And it's a very interesting point about generational trauma that I read about, where somebody said, oh, if you trace back generational trauma far enough, you can see where it starts with one person. And it's like, that's not how it works. Very often, it's an outside influence that causes the generational trauma. And when it's unaddressed, that's how it spreads to the rest of the family. But the next song that I want to talk about, where we talk about Mirabel and kind of what leads up to the inciting incident of the movie, is her ballad, Waiting on a Miracle. And it's her I Want song, which, fun fact, is performed in 3/4 time, also known as waltz time, where there's 3 beats per measure and the quarter note has 1 beat. And this is intentional because Lynn wanted the audience to hear that Mirabel is in a different rhythmic universe than the rest of her family. And it's where we see her frustrations really start to build up. And the audience can see that the reason for her frustration is valid. When she tries to help her family, they see her as nothing more than an annoyance because doesn't have a gift, frequently making mistakes. Because she didn't get her own room, they've kept her in the nursery, which is infantilizing and shows they don't respect her. And when they go to take the family photo, when Antonio gets his gift of talking to animals, it's only the gifted members of the family and those who have been accepted, like Felix and Augustin, who are in the photograph. And what's interesting is she doesn't say she wants a gift. She wants a miracle. If she has a gift, she'll be like the rest of her family. But with a miracle, she'll stand out, and hopefully her sacrifices will finally be noticed and acknowledged. And she's willing to do anything for this family that's just as meaningful, as she says, as moving the mountains. And she wants her family to see, you don't need a gift to be special. And what happens? Well, the Encanto and the Casita answer her wish, but just as the weight of the universe, it answers it in a way that's not comfortable for Mirabel's family, but it's only through discomfort that people can grow.
Right. There's a good, you could say, transition from Mirabel's I Want song to the songs Louisa and Isabel have with her.
Yeah, surface pressure and What Else Can I Do?
Right, because you see from those 3 songs, and a little later when Abuela's backstory is fleshed out,
yep.
Everyone is under pressure. But they're not saying anything.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting because when you consider that the gifts that they are given are their own, and no one can technically take it from them. They do get taken, but the point I'm trying to make is it's theirs. But they don't have autonomy to use the gifts as they so choose the way in which their gifts are to be used is dictated by Abuela.
Yes.
And one of the ways I interpret the film, and this kind of goes into the existentialist philosophy, is this is a story on some level about gaining autonomy. But instead of, when we typically think of autonomy, and when this is where you might think of Simone de Beauvoir and Frantz Fanon battling gender and sexual oppression, and with Frantz Fanon, colonialism. Instead of those external forces kind of putting you in a box, it's the own psychology and culture that Abuela kind of forces on her children, and to a larger extent the entire village.
Yeah.
And that's another part of this.
Yeah.
But just to focus on the family for now, that kind of, you need to, when we talk about, say, Louisa, you need to put the world on your shoulders because only you can do it.
Yep.
Isabel, you at every point need to be perfect, but you can't be you.
Yep.
And it's that kind of pressure that I actually think Maribel becomes the most, she's the main character, but I think the reason she is the main character is because she doesn't have a gift, and she isn't trapped in those sets of expectations.
Oh, yeah.
And so with that kind of outsider perspective, it wasn't surprising to me, and this is further ahead in the movie, so we can back up.
Oh, yeah, sure.
It isn't surprising to me that Maribel is the one who calls Abuela out.
Yeah.
Because she can see what's going on.
And she can say it, too.
Right. And what's interesting about that scene where Abuela and Maribel kind of clash heads is that Isabel and Louisa kind of have this response when the camera pans to them, just kind of look down.
And Isabel is also hunching over. It's like they're withdrawing into themselves.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons I tend towards the love of this movie, because that is realistic. That is the kind of response you would see from a person who is seeing two people clash heads over you. And the kind of reaction you expect someone to have is like, I'm really uncomfortable.
I'm not here.
And I think one of the reasons that happens is because we get we live in the world that is made for us.
Yep.
Right? Heidegger would call it being in the world. That you don't just make yourself out of thin air. You are born into a culture. You're born into a set of expectations, and it's especially seen in this movie. Louisa and Isabel form their identity based on those set of expectations, based on that culture. And it isn't until Maribel is kind of left out of that, and she kind of eggs her sisters on to say,
nudges them.
You can make. You can decide how you use your gifts. You can decide who you are.
Yes. And so I'll just go into Luisa and Isabella's song quickly. So Surface Pressure is Luisa's song, and it's my favorite in the whole movie. Not because I like it, but because I can relate to it. And I'm like, yeah.
Do you not like the song?
No, I love the song, but I don't enjoy it in the sense where it's like,
I see.
yeah, I can have fun with this. It's like, I need to sit and be with my feelings for a minute. So Surface Pressure is an example of the latter two thesis statements of the film. We carry burdens our families never see, and all of us fail to realize that our family members are going through the same thing. Luisa addresses point 2, Mirabelle is experiencing point 3. And it's Luisa's mini I Want song as she expresses how she wants to experience joy and relax if the weight of pressure and expectations was lifted. And what I love about the song is it addresses the concept of personas. The need that people feel to put on a different face or a different personality in front of different people as a defense mechanism instead of truly being themselves. Another term for this that we specifically hear with Black people is code switching, which is a more intense example. And this can cause an existential crisis because if you wear the persona for too long, you start to wonder where the persona ends and you begin. And Luisa isn't at that point yet, but we begin to see the cracks because her gift is physical strength, so people see her as capable, so they assume she's unbreakable emotionally, but underneath she's vulnerable and afraid. And it's the first time that the movie explores how, even if you don't mean to, generational trauma can affect a person's loved ones while the emotions are kept in and problems are unaddressed. And Luisa isn't just worried for herself, she's worried about her family because she knows how to affect everyone. As she says, all we know is pressure. And as long as the family is crushed by these expectations of who they have to be for Abuela to be happy, the pressure will mount. And Lin wrote it in the style of reggae with synthesizer and wrote the song inspired by his elder sister. A lot of older children and middle children relate to it. Now, with Isabella's song in particular, there's one interesting moment where she's going to be engaged to Mariano, who's a man in the town, and when Dolores says he wants 5 babies, her face just flushes, and if you notice, a little white flower pops up in her hair, and as soon as Abuela sees it, pluck, and tosses it on the ground. And so, in the context of what else can I do, Mirabel believes that hugging Isabella will save the Encanto, so at first the song is a bit of a back and forth between Isabella's discovery that she can make whatever flowers she wants that aren't necessarily pretty and perfect, and Mirabel trying to rush the moment and get down to business. And so Isabella's song is part ballad, written to be Shakira-esque, and it's Isabella freeing herself from the need to be perfect. So we see a similar musical bridge in Surface Pressure, only this time it's a true realization song, as Isabella realizes removing the block of perfection allows her to embrace her creativity. And there's a sense of childlike wonder here, which I think makes sense because it feels like the family is frozen in growth as long as they maintain the personas to keep Abuela happy. And when Mirabel sees the woman her sister's becoming, she sees the true person behind the perfect facade and warms up to her a lot more. So pretty soon it's a duet of joy and abundance. And there's something I wanted to ask you specifically. I asked you this a while ago when you were talking about the book you were writing, and I didn't write your answer down, but I figured we could discuss this again as it relates to Encanto. I'm curious, what does existentialist literature say about existentialism and how it can manifest in children, or how it can manifest as we grow older through different stages in life?
Oh, okay.
Loaded question?
No. It's just not a frequently discussed topic, mainly because the beginnings of existentialism are really a challenge to another philosophy, German idealism. So it's a little, it doesn't cover everything, but the closest, I think, and I touched on it a little bit, and I can go into more detail, and this will give us the opportunity to move from the 20th century existentialists in Europe to the 21st century. So I mentioned Heidegger, who had this idea about being in the world, right? And the basic idea is that, like, you aren't born in a vacuum. You don't form your own identity solely based on your own thoughts. You grow up with a certain frame of reference that is given to you, right? You're born into a certain culture. Now, leave aside the question of if it's right or wrong. It's just what you're born into, and when you reach a certain age, you start to question a lot of the stuff that you were taught.
Oh, sure.
Right.
Like Mirabel does here in a way.
Right, and that's how you kind of make your own values and that kind of thing. And that's where the question of, like, authenticity and that kind of stuff comes from. But there's another concept made by, I think it's Mariana Ortega. I I think the book was made in 2014, but I'm not exactly sure. I know it's in the 2010s.
Okay.
It's called In Between, and it takes this idea of Heidegger's to say, well, you're not just born in the world, you're born in between worlds.
Yeah.
Right? So you're not a product of one single culture. Mm-hmm. You are a product of a lot of different cultures that sometimes, and to move it back to the movie, I think they cause a kind of tension because there's this purpose that is given to the family, but it isn't given by the gift, it's given by abuela. On the other hand, abuela herself is the product of various different pressures. She has the pressure of being the matriarch, being the head of the family and caring for her children, while also being the village leader.
Yeah, but also at the same time, she doesn't see... They isolate themselves from the village in a way. They don't see how the village can help them in return.
Well, but I think that goes into the idea of what it means to be a leader in that kind of village. Because imagine this. Imagine you have you're born into two set of values.
Yeah.
One tells you you have to be caring, vulnerable, and loving for your children and help them grow emotionally. But then you're the leader of the village.
Yeah.
And from what I can tell about Abuela, she seems to think that being the leader means making decisions, making sure people are fed, but you don't show weakness.
Not for a minute.
And when she actually has this kind of conflict in herself, I think, or I should say her conflicting roles, the different ways she exists in the world, conflict and cause that tension, because suddenly being the leader of the village means the value you give to your children is based on what they can do for the village. And it suddenly isn't about the children themselves. And those two worlds kind of collide and make that tension.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that this song is later in the movie, but since we're talking about Abuela, we can talk about Dos Antiguas. So it's orchestrated as a ballad driven by violin and acoustic strings, which is perfect because those instruments are associated with romance and tenderness. And fun fact, Lynn wrote the song entirely in Spanish first, instead of writing it in English first and translating it later so as to be more authentic. And the title translates as two caterpillars, and it's played during a montage sequence as Abuela Claudia reminisces about loving and losing her husband, Pedro. And the way Pedro dies, there's a scene of his family crossing the river and him defending them from cavalry with swords on horseback, entirely in shadow. And if you do some research, this is most likely a reference to the Thousand Days War, which occurred in Colombia from 1899 to 1902. And the English lyrics roughly translate to tell a story of two people falling in love and trying to maintain that love in the harsh world they live in. And the most interesting lyric in this song, in my opinion, is they have to fall apart in order to grow, later followed by lyrics saying, "And so afraid of change, in a world that never stops changing, so let the walls come down, the world will never stop changing." And after that, the caterpillars are changed into butterflies, mariposas, which, if you know how butterflies are made, the caterpillar has to completely dissolve in its chrysalis before becoming a butterfly. You have to let go to become something beautiful. So the message is, don't hold on too tight, let the walls come down, and just keep going to experience the world and its wonders, with also the message of, you will see each other soon again. And in this song, you understand why Abuela is the way she is. First being a refugee, and then watching her husband be murdered in front of her. And it brings back what I said about generational trauma before. It doesn't start with one person, but with a horrible outside influence that deeply hurt that person. And if they don't know how to address it, the pain will be passed down, sometimes in ways we cannot see. But in the movie, this is symbolized where she's holding her babies on the floor, and she puts on the black mourning shawl, and she doesn't take it off. She still wears it when she's an old woman. And she wants to preserve the magic and be worthy of the gift that was given, but it isn't until her house is destroyed and she realizes how her need to cling on to what she has affected her family for the worse, and she's genuinely sorry. But on the plus side, now the pain is out in the open and being addressed, healing and rebuilding can begin.
Now that we've come to this point, do you want to talk about Bruno?
We have to talk about Bruno now.
Let's talk about Bruno.
Okay, so, for a bit of context for those who haven't seen the movie, Bruno's gift was being able to see the future. And Abuela knew that the magic was dying, and so she asked Bruno if he could interpret what was going to happen. And he had a vision of the house and Mirabel, and it wasn't clear. But the family interpreted it as Mirabel is going to destroy the house in the Encanto, even though it wasn't clear. And, well, actually, that's not what happened, I'm sorry. He saw that vision, and he realized how his family would see it, as Mirabel destroying the house and the gift. So he ran away to protect her, because in this song, we learn why we don't talk about Bruno. And, fun fact, the biggest reason this song became a hit was because it was sampled on TikTok with the hashtag We Don't Talk About Bruno having 3.5 billion views. So just a few notes about the music. It's first and foremost an ensemble piece with the cha-cha beat, and it's also influenced by Cuban folk, hip-hop, salsa, and guajira. I hope I pronounced that right. And it uses cuatro and tiple, two-string instruments that are relative to the guitar, and heavy bass synthesizers that wouldn't be out of place on a rap track. And I also learned from the account Babatunde Hip Hopera on TikTok that this song is an actual madrigal, which is a type of music style written by European rebels in the 1500s who wanted to write pieces in their own language as opposed to Latin church music, Latin, being Roman Latin. And it's sung polyphonically where there are multiple lines of independent melody. And this song is the ultimate head fake, because the whole movie Bruno has been set up as the evil mustache-twirling villain like the Disney villains of old, who brought misfortune on everyone who heard his visions, like, he told me my fish would die and the next day dead, or he told me I was going to lose my hair and I woke up bald the next morning. Mm-hmm. But the reason Bruno was disliked by his family is that his visions frustrated them, and Abuela in particular. If you believe, right, that you know what your purpose in life is, and someone comes along with contradicting statements saying, your fate isn't as crystal clear as you hoped, would you be so accepting? So for that reason, Bruno's shunned. And this song is also in a way a musicalization of the cracks that appear in the casita, and the family trying to act as though nothing's happening, everything's fine, and just going about their day. And the cracks in this song are the family members secretly spilling their guts about Bruno to Mirabel. And at the same time, everyone is trying to hide this information from Abuela so that they can get ready for Mariano proposing to Isabella. And there's also a bit of foreshadowing as Dolores hints that Bruno is still in the walls of the house, which is heartbreaking. It's like, it's hard to leave the Encanto, but at the same time, when you see him, his place where he set up his dinner table is right behind where his family's dinner table is. It's just sad. And it's at this moment that in the song that Mirabel starts to berate herself for bringing up Bruno in the first place, seeing this moment as only making things worse. But it's actually a good thing. In order to help someone, sometimes you have to shine a light on their shame. And once that shame is talked about in the open, you could take the steps to heal. And this song also shows a pattern most people have in their lives, romanticizing or blowing up an image of a person in your head, making them bigger than they actually are. So when Bruno's revealed, it's intentionally underwhelming as you realize this guy is just awkward, but he really loves his family and wants to protect Mirabel, and he's a sad figure more than a villain, especially as you realize he's been living in the walls of the casita this whole time because he couldn't really leave, which is heartbreaking. And he's with his family every day, but he can't ever be amongst them, which just shows the really, really unfortunate consequences that of his family's actions that are inflicted upon him.
Right. Well, you talk about intergenerational trauma. Bruno is trauma personified when you look at it that way. This is one of those plot holes I was talking about, though. Okay. Because I'd like to add an addendum to, an addition, if you will, to the song, Let's Not Talk About Bruno. Because it should be, we don't talk about Bruno, except for all the times that we talk about Bruno.
Well, to be fair, movies are often done, and musicals are often done, they're set in the time in a person's life where all the other days before that are normal and all the days after that are normal. We only see the moment in one time where nothing is normal and everything changed. So this is probably the first time that they talked about Bruno in forever.
Well, it's kind of like Voldemort, like he who shall not be named.
Harry names him all the time.
Unless we actually decide to name him. Yeah, it's, okay, sure, pal. But I really like the Bruno character.
I do too.
But one of the things that was happy-feely and very Disney, but perhaps not very real to life, is at the end of Bruno's story, where Abuela has recognized the harm she has done and approaches Bruno. And they reconcile. But when I saw that, it took me out of the moment a little. Because the movie had been, I'm going to say realistic, understanding that this is a story about superhumans.
And a magic house.
In a magic house. I understand how ridiculous it sounds. But stay with me. The emotions, the interpersonal relations, that was realistic. And then Bruno just kind of reconciles. It kind of felt like a sitcom where, like, you build up a problem for 25 minutes and have to solve it in the last 5.
Hugs and learning.
Yeah. I think Bruno, despite Abuela's acknowledgement, would have been well within his rights, and I think it may have been more realistic not to reconcile. If he had just been like, okay, but this isn't gonna work. I lived in the walls for how many years?
With rats.
Yeah. So I get that you're sorry, but that doesn't undo the pain that was done.
One other thing that I could see for something being realistic is when he reunites with all of his family. I could see him, forgiving his sisters, Peppa and Julieta, and establishing a relationship with them, their husbands, and their children, because they were just trying to keep Abuela happy, and they participated in it, but they kind of, you get the sense that they didn't really want to. So I could see him forgiving them easily as a way to be more realistic, like openly communicating with them, but maybe holding off on Abuela for a good long while. Yeah. So, before we get to the final number, were there any other existential points that the film brought up that you wanted to talk about with Bruno in particular, with any of the moments that we've discussed?
With Bruno in particular, beyond what we've already talked about, I don't think so.
Okay.
There's this kind of idea that Bruno kind of is problematic for existentialists, because Bruno can see into the future. And that implies, like, a fate, but, like, the existentialists don't believe in fate, so it's kind of, it's. Although, to be fair, I guess his visions could be interpreted as you could have this outcome or that outcome. So
yeah.
I guess it more depends on how you interpret his visions.
And if you were going to say anything, I apologize, but it also reminds me of how what we talked about before in our previous episodes with absolutes. Bruno, in his vision with Mirabel, he doesn't see it as like, oh, she's gonna save the casita, or she's gonna destroy the casita. He sees it as, it could go either way. It just depends on what she does. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's reasonable. I'm not sure it's an existentialist. Well, it is, but we've already hinted on it in one dimension. I want to bring it to a different dimension. The idea of autonomy, because I talked about it as in the autonomy of the family, the members of the family. But there's another layer to this movie that kind of isn't addressed, which is the autonomy of the village.
Yeah, yes.
Now, I understand in a Disney movie, the intended portrayal is, look at these nice people using their gifts for the betterment of the village. Now, in the real world, what you're doing is saying, look at these superhuman people not basically taking over all of the functions of a village and saying, we know what's best for you, let us do it, and you just sit there and be good.
Ooh.
I don't like that message.
No, I don't either.
I understand it's not what's intended, but
no, they could have, to be fair, another movie could have taken the same premise and taken a really sharp, dark left turn with that.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
No, like, the difference between this family and a country oligarchy is that the people in this movie are nice.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically the only difference. But that leads to my problem with the ending, if you want to move there.
Okay, so I'll just talk about the final number, and then we can get to your thoughts on the ending. So the final number isn't a reprise, but it does call back to the musical motifs and moments of other characters. There's a bit of We Don't Talk About Bruno in there, a bit of Colombia, Mi Encanto, as well as replaying snippets of melodies and musical sections, so it's a musical melting pot. And it gives the resolution that the film structure needs, right? Abuela apologizes to her children, Bruno's back, welcomed back. The neighbors help to rebuild the house out of gratitude for all that the family has given them. Mariano and Dolores decide to start seeing one another, and the casita gets its magic back. And now there are no doors for every family member, but one big door in the front with all of them on it, and it's Mirabel who makes the door appear because she helped her family come together. And the best finishing touch is that when they take the new family photo, not only is Mirabel in it, but they're not posing with, perfect fake smiles, like the smiles that often come up when someone says 1, 2, 3 cheese, and you just go, eat. The photo is of them living in the moment as a family, and it's not static. It's living and filled with joy. They no longer live for their gifts, they live for each other. So that's the song. But what were you going to say about the ending?
So let me kind of correct one thing you said. The villagers came to help rebuild the house because it was destroyed.
Yeah.
Because the magic fell apart. First of all, every house, every church was made by that family. There is no way these people can help rebuild a house. I don't believe that. They have been dependent on this family for everything.
Yeah.
So
especially for building stuff with Luisa being able to lift heavy loads.
And you imagine, like, it's not, these people are not like lazy. But the reason I think there's no way this is realistic is because Abuela goes out of her way to make sure that, like, oh, we need to move this church. Well, all of you people without little special powers, you're not allowed to move it on your own or to build a new one. No, you are going to stay there and we are going to move it for you.
Luisa, get over here.
Yeah, it doesn't even give them, it denies their autonomy.
Yeah.
So I constantly had that problem with the movie because it doesn't seem to realize that's happening. And it just got kind of annoying. But my big problem comes when the house reassembles itself.
Yeah.
I would have liked it to be destroyed.
I think some people would too. Or if at the very least, when it was rebuilt, that the magic didn't come back. I've heard some people say that online, like, it's just a regular house now. They have each other, that's all they need. End of the movie.
Well, I mean, it coincides with the problem of denying autonomy to the village. Because in large part, a lot of the conflict, if you like, the real villain of the movie are these gifts. Because they put this pressure, this undue pressure onto the family, and they feel like they're unworthy of the gift. Or at least certainly Abuela has that sentiment. And they're constantly trying to prove that they deserve the gift. And when the gift is suddenly gone, everyone's an equal.
All they have left is themselves.
Right.
They're
and
left.
So once if the gifts were just gone, Suddenly everyone, like, that message of, like, gaining autonomy, that's there. But once you have those powers, like, yeah, big family picture, but again, the movie doesn't seem to realize there's a whole village, and now they're kind of shoved back into that status of, like, we will do everything for you.
I think what Disney hopes people take away from that ending, this is just me offering an alternative perspective, is that based on Louisa's number, what else can I do, kind of foreshadowed that, is that the family learns at the end of the movie that even though they have these gifts, they don't have to be chained to it anymore because they don't have to use it the way Abuela wants them to. They can use it however they want now.
Sure, but I mean, I don't think that resolves the pressure that they put on themselves, because one aspect of that pressure is Abuela's expectations.
Yes.
But the other source of the pressure is you care for the people under your stead. Right? She's not a main character, but I think it's the grandmother who constantly has to keep making food to...
Oh, the mother.
It's the mother? Yeah. Constantly at the kitchen making food all the time.
Yeah, that was one thing. It's like, there's no doctors in this town.
Right. But you'd understand, like, even if there was a doctor, they couldn't do anything because you have this woman coming around with magic powers. Here, eat this. Oh, your broken forearm is suddenly healed. Well, what? I mean, does her condition change at all? People are still sick. People are still going to get broken arms. Is she now expected to be like, oh, you know, we had this big family moment, and so I'm not going to fix your arm? Really?
That's a fair point.
Come on.
But one of my favorite memes, though, is with Julieta with her arepa con queso, and people are saying, do you think she can cure mental illness as well? And someone said, I don't think so. Look at her family. Oh, shots fired.
Oh, that's good.
But yeah, so this is where we're going to end the episode because I feel like it's flowed to its natural conclusion. And I will say, you know, overall we both like this movie, but I think we brought up some interesting points that for our audience to think about the message that Disney is sending with this movie overall, whether or not it's successful. And I think we can say mostly, or maybe Aaron wouldn't say mostly. It's successful with some things, successful with some other things. But the point is, we can analyze this story through an existential lens, and we can discuss whether or not it works in that way.
I would love part 2.
Ooh.
That would be great. I really like this movie. I think most of the elements in it work. It's not that anything particularly doesn't work. What it is it has a kind of innocence.
Yes.
And innocence can be cute, but it can also be very destructive.
Yeah. On that note,
I always have to leave you on a down note.
just something to ruminate over.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to another installment of Where's the Director? Like, comment, and subscribe and all that jazz. If you follow me on social media, I post the episodes to social media as well. And we'll be back next time with another musical to look at through an existential lens. Aaron, thank you as always for coming back for another episode.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll see you for the next one. Bye.
Bye.